Goedemiddag allemaal, good afternoon everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch. My name is Maarten Decat. I'm co-founder and CEO of Alimity, and we're here going to talk about 5 tips to take control of user access within days, specifically in the NIS2 context. There's time for Q&A after the session, but I don't mind being interrupted, so if you have a specific question about something specific that I'm talking about, just raise your hand and I'll get into it on the spot. And let's start by giving the good example. So raise your hand if you worry about whether people in your organization still, or that left your organization, still have access to systems in your organization, orphaned accounts and stuff like that, and which systems they can access. Raise your hand if you worry about who exactly has administrator privileges to critical systems, servers, all of those things. Yeah. Do you know who exactly has access to privacy-sensitive employee data, like GDPR data, employee data, customer data, all of those things? Do you know who exactly from external users, like from your partners or project collaborators and so, can still access your systems? All of those questions, that's the cybersecurity part of identity and access management. That's where the cyber risk in managing users and access of your employees lie. And so, with SaaS and cloud and working from home, nothing new that I'm going to tell you. The network perimeter has completely broken down, and really those users, those accesses, those permissions, those accounts are the only things still tying together all of the pieces in your IT infrastructure. And that's the reason why these days 99% of the attacks, of the successful attacks, start with stolen credentials. Is the reason why modern security approaches like zero trust security, they all stress stuff like minimizing the identity attack surface or applying least privilege. Nobody wants to be that CISO that is fired because their systems were hacked because of an account that was hacked from an employee that left the organization 5 years ago, those kinds of things. And it's also the reason why access control or identity management, user access management, whatever you want to call it, is key to showing that you're compliant with regulations like ISO 27001, SOC 2, the SIS controls, or the buzzword of today, NIS2. So NIS2, very briefly, you've probably heard of it before. I asked ChatGPT to draw me a picture to explain it, but it doesn't really help me. Still like the picture though. So what is NIS2? It's a European directive meant to speed up, accelerate the robustness, the cybersecurity and the resilience of critical cybersecurity, critical organizations in the European Union. And very briefly, the difference between NIS1 and NIS2 is that NIS2 has a broader scope. So there are the sectors of NIS1, of course, still, but also companies of additional sectors like space industry, wastewater, but even food industry, chemicals. All of those companies are now liable and should raise their stakes for cybersecurity. And that's important because the second major difference between NIS1 and NIS2 is that NIS2 is a lot less voluntary, meaning that there are specific requirements, that there is supervision, and there will be penalties if you don't apply to those requirements, comply to those requirements. And regarding those requirements is threefold. First of all, it's governance, meaning that the management of an organization that is in one of those critical sectors is now held liable to approve the cybersecurity measures taken in the organization and is liable for infringements. That's important. And secondly, regarding those risk management measures, the standard lists specific measures that you should take, but in general, it should be proportional to your exposure to risk, so the size of your organization, the type of business that you're doing and so on. And then thirdly, much in line with GDPR, there are also reporting requirements. So if something goes wrong, you should report actively to CSIRT, to the end users, to your customers and so on. So then zooming in a bit on those risk management measures, the standard even mentions specific ones, and they cover lots of different topics. So there are, on the one hand, organizational things like that you should do regular risk analysis, very important, or that you should have incident handling processes, or that you should have business continuity planning, all of those things. And then secondly, there are more technical measures to be taken, and that's stuff like cybersecurity training, applying cryptography and encryption to your data, or performing access control policies, applying access control policies, all of those things. So the challenge with NIS2 is that if you look at this slide, it's clearly a lot. And the challenge becomes even bigger for those organizations that were not enforced or forced to do those things before, but now with NIS2 they're forced to do all of this all at once with a deadline on there. So it's clearly a lot and it's sudden. But the good news is that these things aren't new. This is very much in line with ISO 27001 and SOC 2 and so on. So we know how to do this. And in general, the first and most important step to do is that last rectangle there is the regular risk analysis. Start with knowing or analyzing, well, what is the business that you're doing? What is the data, the critical data that you're handling? Where are your critical systems so that you know what to protect? That's step one. Step two is the organizational things. Make sure that you know how to identify an attack and how to respond to that so that you're not caught with your pants on your feet when something actually happens. You should know what to do then. And then once you have those, and that's actually not that big of an effort, then start applying the risk management measures. Start doing the technical things and work on those measures that lower your risk the most. Do those things first. And that brings me back to the start of my story. Because these days, because we now control less and less of the underlying infrastructure, and the attackers just come to the front door, those users that I talked about, the access, the user accounts in your systems, those make up a vast part of your attack surface. And so, as a result, one of the first things to do is know that there are no orphaned accounts in your systems, or know who exactly has administrator privileges to critical servers, or know who can access privacy-sensitive data. And once you know all of that, minimize those accesses. Make sure that there are minimal accounts lying around so that the likelihood of stolen credentials goes down, but also minimize what the actual people in your organization can do so that the impact of stolen credentials goes down. So in short, what NIS2 asks you to do, amongst many different things, is to have provable control over who can access which data and which applications. And if you look at this slide, if we then very briefly put that in context with the focus of the identity and access management market, you see that there's a bit of a difference there, a bit of a gap. Because the large vendors, people like a SailPoint or an Omada, they do not focus on providing this cybersecurity value as quickly as possible, but they focus on automating user management workflows. It's like if someone new enters your organization, you see that in the HR system, then automatically accounts should be created in many different systems based on which part of the organization they are, so that they can do their job from day one. And if they then leave, then these accounts should automatically be removed and so on. That's immense value. So I'm not dissing on these vendors in any way. That's immense value, especially if you're a large organization and you don't want, or probably you just cannot, do all of this effort manually. But and from a cybersecurity perspective, if you do all of those things, you're even in control by definition, because there shouldn't be any leftover accounts if you automate everything. But the downside is that this is a lot of work. This is something that the big banks can do if you have an IT department or even an IAM department of 10 or 50 or 100 people. But for those organizations, like I said before, that are now part of the new sectors in NIS2, they have to do a lot with a small cybersecurity team. For those, this probably is not achievable. And so as a result, if you take a look at the market, you see that just many organizations, they skip this part of cybersecurity. User access management, too big of a hassle, let's just accept the risks and go on. So in general, maybe you see some automation regarding the core systems from HR to Active Directory or maybe to Azure AD, but there's a vast lack of governance and visibility and control over all of those specific critical systems for your organizations. And that's exactly where Elimity wants to come in. So at Elimity, we want to provide a more lightweight approach to identity governance. We don't do everything like the big boys do, but we focus on cybersecurity risk first, meaning that it focuses on collecting the data, your current users, accesses, permissions, roles, whatever that you have, so that you can then understand who can do what, identify risks, and work on those risks. That's the essence of our approach. And so we work with CISOs, specifically of organizations ranging from 500 people, with a small security team that again have to do a lot, up to organizations of 50,000 people that you all know that do a lot already, but want to increase their internal control of user access. And so the essence of our approach is that we look at this problem as a data problem, which in my opinion it just is. This is a lot of data that you have lying around in different systems in your organization, so apply a data mindset to that. And those are just, in essence, three different things. Create visibility, like I said before, then review that access, both for the core security team, but also for the other people in your organization, like team leaders, application owners, maybe site owners in SharePoint, what have you, and then monitor over time. And so in total, what you want, the data mindset that I'm talking about, is a closed loop approach that really focuses on getting in control and staying in control as easily and as cheaply as possible. And so we provide a platform specifically for this. I'm not going to give a product presentation in this slide, in this presentation, but very briefly, if you want, it's 5 things: gathering data, understanding who can access what, indicating necessary changes, monitoring over time to be alerted automatically, and running access reviews or recertification processes to involve everyone in the organization that is responsible for a part of user access management. So in total, if you apply this approach, then you have this provable control, meaning that you can show to an auditor, yes, we know who can access what, we've indicated changes, we even have the audit proof to show that there were things that were found, but we immediately responded to that and we cleaned things up. That's what I mean with provable control. And so this, in essence, this approach, this line of thinking turns around the traditional IGA journey where you start with designing role models and setting up very expensive connectors to many different systems and distributing ownership throughout your organization, but instead you focus on where your actual cybersecurity risk is. Meaning focus on identifying access risks, cleaning it up, and once you get to that improved cybersecurity posture, only then start thinking of maybe implementing role models and use the data that you have in the platform for that. And only then start thinking of maybe adding structural control by automating provisioning, going the full 10 miles if you want, but focus on cybersecurity return on investment first. That's really what I'm trying to get across here today. And so if we'll take a look at what that looks like in practice, this is a specific case study of an organization of around 2,000 employees. And their focus really was a bit like I said before, small, well, 2,000 employees organization, but a small security team. They were faced with many different things, and the CISO wanted an efficient approach to show that he was in control regarding user access management as well. And in those cases, our standard approach is these 5 steps. So the first step is where you work towards that visibility as quickly as possible. And what is important there is these 2 days and 7 days. We're not talking a deployment of weeks, months, or years even. This is about days. So those first visibility, you typically work that in an iterative approach. You do your risk assessment, you list your critical systems, and you start with those systems that are least effort and highest value, of course. And then you work towards more effort and still high value. And so in practice, what we see 9 out of 10 these days, that's Active Directory, Azure AD, an HR system ideally as well to tie everything together. And then it depends on the type of organization. We have customers that focus on local database admins or administrators on key servers, maybe development environments like a GitHub or SharePoint. Last 6 months, we've been asked a lot for SharePoint cleanups for some reason. In any way, those are the things that you want to include as quickly as possible so that you then gather this into one data foundation that says, well, this is the employee, has accounts there and there and there, can do all of those things, and that's when you can start making sense of that data. And to help you do that even further, we have this KPI guide, we call it, this framework of 8 key controls, devised from ISO 27001 and the SIS control specifically, that give you lots of examples of things that you should apply to your identity data. And those 8 controls, I can give a speech, or someone of my team, to be honest, can give a speech of that for 2 hours if you want. But in essence, it's the most important ones are the orphaned accounts, so the things that I've been talking about since the start, accounts that shouldn't be there anymore. In practice, accounts that haven't logged in for a long time, or were linked to someone that already left the organization, or cannot be linked to someone, all of those variations. Then privileged accounts, so people that can do the risky things in your systems, people that are a member of a critical group or have admin rights in one of your operational servers or stuff like that. And then around financial systems or in a financial context, definitely also segregation of duty, because that's a critical countermeasure against fraud to take. And then the 8th category, the business-specific controls, also always a very interesting one, because you know in your organization what is specific and what is important. Can be something around geography, or people from the marketing department cannot access that. Whatever that you have, put those things in there so that eventually you end up with this library of what we call security controls, or in the platform stored queries, that immediately show you where your largest risks are, so you can then dig into the details, for example, look at outliers and so on, but really start working on that and improving your cybersecurity posture. So in the business case that we were talking of, they had a strong focus on Active Directory as a very first, very limited step. We had that data in there in like an hour because it's out of the box. And after a few days, they were able to identify orphaned accounts in many variations, clean that up, and that's really what the CISO was looking for. Because identity governance has this ring to it that it's a lot of effort for medium value. But in this case, it was a low effort. You could show immediate responses, immediate progress, and it's the perfect starting place to then add more and more systems to the mix, build your overview, and prioritize your next steps in this actual cleanup phase. So that's a summary of those steps 1, 2, and 3. That's really focused on the core security team of an organization, giving you the handles to improve cybersecurity and lower your risk. But at some point, that team doesn't know everything anymore. If you're an organization with hundreds or thousands of people, then you have to involve others in this exercise as well. So that's where steps 4 and 5 come in. So those other people, those are people like team leaders or application owners, maybe data owners, that are typically responsible for just a small part of the organization, like the people in their team, the accesses to their application, accesses to their file shares, all of those. And so in that case, you want to include them, but you don't want to smack them down with all of that information that you have in there that is for the core security team. And also in practice, most of the time, these people are less technical than your core security team. So rather, in that case, involve them in a process. This is a well-known process within identity governance called access reviews or recertifications, where you ask them to provide feedback for a specific part of your data. The process by itself, I'm not going to go through it, but it's about asking feedback, and then gathering all of the feedback and working on that. But in essence, it's asking them to give their blessing about their part which they are responsible for. And in that phase 4, first start by focusing on asking questions around the risks that you identified in phases 1, 2, and 3. So for example, if there are, let's say, 200 of these admin Active Directory accounts that you could link to people that already left your organization, that's probably something that you want to ask explicitly. You want to ask them, hey, these are the people in your team, they still have these accounts. Can you tell me, as the core security team, whether these accounts are still needed? And this has 2 major benefits. From a risk perspective, you focus on those things or those risks that you already found, so you're working to lower your risk as effectively as possible. But secondly, from an organization perspective, we are asking a specific question to those people, because taking the business along in this process, in practice, is a big challenge. And if you just smack them down with, these are all the AD groups listed to people in your team, they will not do anything. They will just click approve all, and that's it. If you focus on specific questions, specific risks, that's how you get them along in this journey. And then afterwards, if you have reached the situation where you've lowered your risk for all of these key controls, then go to more structural governance, where you repeat this exercise for your complete data set every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, whatever suits your risk profile, and implement continuous monitoring as well, so that if new risks are found, that our platform can notify you proactively and you can immediately respond to new risks that were identified. So those are the 5 steps of the general approach. And that brings me to the homework that I wanted to send you home with. So I did the explanation together with our platform, but even if you don't do it with our specific platform, at least try to look at user access management as a data problem, and then do those 5 steps. So when you get back to the office, start with a risk analysis. And probably, since you're here on a cybersecurity conference, you've already done that work. You know where your most important assets are and where the identity sources for those systems are located. Then secondly, if you take anything home from what I've said, make this a data exercise. Collect data. So from Active Directory, export the data of the users and the groups. Some of your critical systems, export whatever that is in there for the permissions to your critical systems, and then apply these essential security controls. I will show you the link to the guide in 2 slides again, if you want more inspiration, but at least look at the orphaned accounts, the privileged accounts, the separation of duty and business-specific controls. And then if you find risks, act. And the last part that is often forgotten, but where the real value is actually in the long term, monitor. So repeat to collect data and apply controls to show to your management, to show to CISO, to show to auditors that you're actually doing something, that you're improving, and that will buy you a lot of goodwill in the organization and outside the organization. So again, even if you don't do it with our platform, do these 5 steps. If you want to do them efficiently, come talk to us and take a look at our platform. If you want more information, or that's something that I have to say as well, if this is even too much work for you, also know that we and our partners provide this as a service. We call this a security assessment, where you don't use the platform yourself, but we come in with the platform under our shoulder, connected to the different applications, and in a few days of work, you have this overview of your most important risk with recommendations on how to clean up, and that's really the perfect starting spot to show with real numbers that there are risks, that you should do something there, and that you can start improving your risk posture. So that being said, if you want more information, the bottom right there is the link towards the KPI guide, security assessment to the left, and also know that there's an assessment, or a webinar, on November 19th if you want more information, together with our partner Segeka. And if you want more information right now, we're also at the booth of Segeka, so it's the very first booth that you see when you enter the venue. You can't miss it. And if there are any questions, then we still have some time for questions right now. In any case, thank you for your attention.